Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're completely deconstructing a story you probably think you know inside and out, the famous account of Joseph and his coat of many colors. But we're not treating this like some simple Sunday school fable. No, we're taking a deep dive into the hidden political maneuvering, the dark psychological depths, and the cold, calculated commerce of this Genesis narrative. We're going to examine the original texts and commentaries to uncover the hidden motives, the actual money-changing hands, and the overarching providence tying it all together. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Distance breeds distortion. The source commentary makes this absolutely brilliant psychological observation about how the brothers' plot actually started. In Genesis chapter 37, it notes they saw Joseph approaching from afar. That physical distance? It literally mirrored a massive emotional distance. You know, when we're far removed from someone, it becomes incredibly easy to just label them, strip away their humanity, and let our anger morph into a distorted justification for violence. The physical distance gave them the time and space to let their collective hatred fester into a murderous plot before he even showed up. And that kind of distorted thinking brings us to our first section.
Section 1. The Dreamer's Deadly Plot.
So let's look at how this conspiracy really took shape as Joseph walked toward them. The original Hebrew term the brothers used to mock him was Baal Halomot. Now, while it's usually just translated as dreamer, it literally means the master of dreams or owner of dreams. They were dripping with sarcasm here. They weren't just annoyed by an arrogant little brother, they felt deeply threatened by his visions of ruling over them. Their terrifying logic was basically this: if we kill the master of dreams, we kill the dreams themselves. They wanted to permanently crush his grand visions by throwing him into a pit just to see what would become of his so-called destiny.
A really crucial point the commentary makes about group dynamics is that attacking a 17-year-old boy, their own flesh and blood, was a horrifying crime. But the collective agreement of the group acted like a psychological shield. Groupthink completely blinded them to the sheer evil of their actions. Because everyone else in the circle was nodding along and validating the hatred, the extreme cruelty of murdering a teenager suddenly felt entirely justified, completely erasing their individual moral compasses, its mob mentality taking over. But then, the narrative abruptly shifts when two brothers step in to alter the plan. Let's look closely at what they were really up to.
Section 2. Hidden Motives, Reuben and Judah. On the surface, if you just skim the text, Reuben and Judah look like the merciful heroes of the story, right? I mean, they step in to stop an outright murder. But as we contrast their actions, we see their interventions had absolutely nothing to do with pure mercy. They were driven by completely hidden, self-serving agendas. Reuben was desperately trying to restore his lost authority, while Judah, he was doing cold, hard math, calculating profit over blood guilt. Let's break these down.
First up, let's examine Reuben's secret goal. He suggests throwing Joseph into a pit rather than killing him on the spot, secretly planning to pull him out later and return him to their father. Was this brotherly love? Yeah, not quite. Remember, Reuben had recently committed a grave sin with Bilhah, shattering his father Jacob's trust and losing his authority as the firstborn. The commentary points out that this quote-unquote rescue was a highly calculated political maneuver. Reuben needed a massive win to get back in his father's good graces and restore his status. Joseph was literally just a pawn in his political comeback.
And then we have Judah. While Reuben is away, Judah makes a deeply pragmatic pivot. He asks the group, what profit is there if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? He prevents the murder, sure, but he suggests selling Joseph into a lifetime of slavery instead. Judah's motive is this chilling mix of pragmatism and greed. Why carry the permanent, heavy guilt of having your brother's actual blood on your hands when you can just make a clean profit? He successfully argues that human trafficking is simply a better business decision than murder. And that calculated decision leads directly to Joseph being sold to a passing caravan of Ishmaelite and Midianite merchants.
Section 3. Sold for 20 shekels.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the number itself, 20 shekels of silver. This wasn't just some random amount they haggled out in the desert. According to the legal codes found later in Leviticus chapter 27, 20 shekels was the exact standardized legal price for a male slave aged 5 to 20. Joseph was 17. This detail reveals the terrifyingly clinical nature of the transaction. They didn't just get rid of their brother, they liquidated an asset for exactly market value.
Textual analysis of the aftermath reveals a pretty chilling scene. The brothers successfully get their money and remove Joseph from the picture. But remember Reuben's grand political plan to rescue him? Well, the text shows Reuben returning to the pit later, completely unaware of the sale, only to find it empty. He violently tears his clothes in absolute despair. But as the source points out, his grief is heavily mixed with panic. His calculated ticket to restoring his firstborn authority is gone. The whole plan is a bust. With Joseph gone and Reuben panicking, the brothers now have a massive cover-up to execute. And this brings us to the dark irony of how they deceive their father.
Section 4. The irony of deception.
They take Joseph's famous tunic, dip it in goat's blood, and bring it to Jacob. And this brilliantly illustrates a tragic linguistic irony in the original text. They hand the bloody coat to their father and use the Hebrew word nakar, which means to recognize or discern. They say, "Please discern if this is your son's tunic." And Jacob, falling hook, line, and sinker into the trap, uses the exact same word back, saying he does nakar or recognize it. It's a devastating manipulation, using Jacob's own sight and discernment against him to cement the lie.
This really reveals an incredible generational karma at play. Just compare Jacob's past to what his sons are doing to him now. Decades earlier, Jacob deceived his own blind father, Isaac, by placing goat skins on his hands to steal the family blessing. Now his sons are deceiving him by putting goat's blood on a coat to hide a horrific crime against his favorite son. The man who used a goat to deceive his father is now utterly destroyed by his own sons using a goat to deceive him. The irony is deeply profound and honestly, really tragic. If the story ended right there, it would just be a dark tale of betrayal, human trafficking, and generational trauma. But the source material pushes us to see the overarching divine strategy behind this entirely human mess.
Section 5. Divine Providence at Work.
The source commentary, in a specific meditation point, shifts the lens entirely. It argues that God didn't engineer this tragedy, but he actively used the brothers' evil to orchestrate an unbelievable preservation strategy. God utilized Joseph's descent into Egypt not as a tool for revenge against the brothers, but to set up a refuge. He was using this horrific event to protect the Abrahamic family line from an impending severe famine that would have otherwise wiped them out.
Let's zoom out and see how this builds a massive historical framework. The pit was just the starting point. In the past, God made a covenant promise to Abraham. In their present, God is using Joseph to save Jacob's family from starvation. But look at the bigger picture. Dropping this family into Egypt provides them an incubator for 400 years to multiply from a single, dysfunctional family into a massive nation. All of this eventually leads to their future return to Canaan. Joseph's kidnapping was the brutal yet absolutely necessary first domino to fulfill a centuries-long covenant. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this explainer, redefining what Joseph's life was truly about.
Section 6. Service, not just success.
A devotional text from the source, titled A Dream of Service, Not Success, perfectly frames the theology of everything we've just covered. We often read Joseph's story as a classic rags-to-riches tale of personal success. But the text clarifies that God didn't select Joseph just to elevate him to a position of power or to make him some sort of superstar. God assigned Joseph a grueling path of betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, specifically so he could become a vessel of salvation for others. His high status in the end, that wasn't the goal, it was merely the tool required for him to serve and save his family and entirely preserve a nation.
And that leaves us with a powerful question. The source material challenges us to look inward based on this deconstruction. When we receive privileges, talents, or even endure strange hardships, are we viewing them as a way to elevate ourselves and stand above others, much like Joseph's brothers feared? Or are we willing to see them as Joseph eventually did, as a specific calling to serve, preserve, and lift up those around us? It's a profound lens through which to view not just this ancient text, but the very narrative of our own lives. Thanks for hanging out for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.